Good morning, folks. This is Father Walsh, and Christmas is around the corner, isn't it? So it's a good opportunity to, in a sense, try and focus our minds on what is about to take place. And as you know yourselves, that there are two infancy narrative stories regarding the birth of Christ. The one from Luke, which is a very familiar one, which sort of focuses attention upon Mary and her role in the whole question of the nativity of Jesus. Also in Matthew's Gospel, Matthew's the focus is not so much upon Mary; it's upon Joseph and his role in all of this, and how he really struggled with when the angel, when in a dream he came to an awareness that his espoused wife to be Mary was pregnant, so he had to in a sense work himself, figure that out for himself before they finally came together and Jesus was born. So if I would just suggest that suggest that during this time, that especially coming up to Christmas Day, that you read and reread those stories to give you a good sort of insight into the birth of Jesus and what it was like at that particular point in time. So having said that, I think the two words which are sort of foundational to taking a look at the Christmas season. One is the word anticipation, and the other is the word fulfillment. First of all, with regard to anticipation, like nowadays, unfortunately, because of commercialization, the whole Christmas season has been hijacked, and so Christmas season begins before Thanksgiving nowadays, and the emphasis, of course, seems to be most of the time on what's not on what it should be, but what's wrong about Christmas. But it turns into an opportunity for really commercial purposes, which obviously that's not what it was meant to be. So if you think about anticipation from a scriptural point of view and from a church point of view, obviously the birth of Jesus was anticipated for a couple of centuries, and the whole question of a Messiah coming among his people. But unfortunately, with the art of the Messiah, there were different concepts in terms of what that Messiah would be like. The predominant concept, of course, was that he was going to come as a military figure, and at that particular point in time, you know that Israel was under the domination of the Romans, and so I mean, all along, I think the people of Israel wanted to get rid of the Romans because they were touched to death and because they felt totally oppressed. So for the majority of them, when they thought about a Messiah coming, they thought about him coming as a military figure. There were also, of course, those who thought of him coming as some kind of a royal figure, and that again he would lead Israel in the right direction. But then there's a sort of a smaller group that believed that he was going to come as a lowly figure, and that through a life of dedication and a life of sacrifice, that he was really going to free all of us. So of course, when Jesus came, the majority of people were, I suppose, initially everybody was excited, but when they came to realize who he really was, that he was a humble, obedient servant. That's how he saw himself. He was sort of the shepherd of the flock. When they saw him, that, I suppose, initially a lot of people were excited because of his charism and his personality and his preaching. But after a while, people got especially the religious people of the day, just couldn't handle him, because first of all, they didn't like his message, number one, and number two, because they didn't want anybody to tell them what to do. So consequently, ultimately, I suppose, he got put to death by a variety of different forces who didn't either believe him or didn't accept what he had to say. So that's the anticipation part of it. The fulfillment then, of course, is the fact that we know that who he was when he came among us. Nobody really expected God to come on earth. I mean, that was probably a shocker that God came in human form and that he lived among us as a human being. And he came really for two purposes. First of all, he came to show us how to live, but most especially the whole Christmas season. It's all about when we talk about fulfillment. It's all about he came as a savior. He came to save us from ourselves, to save us from sin, ultimately to save us from this world, so that we have the opportunity of finally getting to heaven. So when we think of Jesus coming as a savior, we think of him coming as a baby, but the baby part of him, it needs to be sort of combined with Christ on the cross. Like he came among us, even though he came as a humble child. Ultimately, he ended up on the cross, and it's in and through his death and resurrection that he achieved our salvation. So the whole question of he came among us today, as the psalm response is, today he came among us. He came among us as a savior. But remember that the savior part of it is only fully accomplished in and through his death on the cross. So when we talk about fulfillment, we talk about what he has accomplished for us. And now at this point in time, we're the ones who have said yes to him in our baptism. And so if we hope to achieve what he lived and for what he died, if we want to achieve that in our lives, in other words, if we hope to get to heaven, then also we have to die to ourselves in this world, so that when our time comes, we'll rise with him to a newness of life. So Merry Christmas.